Okay, we're going to have to hold that and come back to it. Item number 3, Housing and Homelessness Investment Plan Delegation of Authority. Carried? Carried? Item number 4, Emergency Shelter Rooms Agreement with Private Hotels and Motels. We can hold. I was hoping not to keep the housing staff here all day, but is it short? Okay. Okay, so we'll take questions on item number 2. Councilor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just on item number 2, I was just trying to understand. There seemed to be in the compliance declarations a whole series of reports that were in background of this piece that weren't part of the compliance declarations. They were annual reconciliation reports from 2016, and I'm just trying to understand: are those part of the documents which are the 2016 financial documents part of what is going to be conveyed to the LIN? I found it confusing between the years. Are we dealing with fiscal year 2017, or are we dealing with fiscal year 2016, or both?
So, Madam Chair, we work off the ministry's calendar year for reporting. Their calendar year is April 1st to March 31st.
Okay, so if I look at the various compliance agreements, some are from January 1st, 2017 to December 31st, and then there are others that are from April 1st, 2017 to March 31st, 2018.
So the difference there is the LSAW, which is a long-term care service accountability agreement, goes from April 1st to March 31st, and the MSAW, which encompasses our day centers, goes from January 1st to December 31st. So the reporting timeframes are different on the 2 service agreements.
Okay, so given that all of the compliance agreements are for essentially fiscal year or calendar year 2017, is there any relevance to the annual reconciliation reports having been included as background documents for 2016?
Madam Chair, so the reconciliation is for the 2016 year, but we submit that in 2017.
Okay, so that had already been submitted, because
Yes.
it was in the background documents for this item.
Right.
Why?
It's supports the compliance. That's the kind of information that we need to validate that we've shared with the LIN.
Okay, and so as a result of this information, is the city in compliance with all of the required deadlines for this information to be submitted?
Madam Chair, yes, we are.
So the LIN isn't imposing any fines on the city as a result of this?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on item number 2? Seeing none. Is it received or carried? Received? Carried? Carried. Carried, thank you. And then item number 4, Councillor Nussbaum.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wondered if staff can comment on this. I know we passed the motion back in November. Is staff comfortable with this direction to them? Do they see any potential complications, or can this be rolled effectively into the work that's going to be taking place as part of the mid-year review of the Housing and Homelessness Plan?
Madam Chair, so we're comfortable with this particular motion. It is work that we can incorporate into some of the planning and review of all of our services and programs for the 10-year Housing and Homelessness Plan. We do continue, however, to be under some pressure in the city in terms of our overflow capacity. I think last time I was here, I talked about the rise in family homelessness, and that continues to be significant and sustained. So we can do the work, and certainly we'll come back and with some recommendations on how we can try and minimize or reduce the use of hotels and motels.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brockington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just trying to get staffs to elaborate further on if item 2 was passed, item 2 of Councillor Fleury's motion, because I'm concerned about potentially restricting the city's ability to find places, temporary places to house families, and there's probably a good reason why motels and hotels in Ward 12 have been relied upon in the past. So what will the net impact be on the city if there was pressure to look elsewhere than some of the current establishments that you've been using? I understand the councillor's concerns that he raised last year when this was being debated, but I don't know if it's affordability, if there's advantages to accommodating people in a similar neighborhood, if there's other services that need to be provided, but I'm just looking for a comment on what the impact will be.
Madam Chair, so we have implemented certain strategies within the family shelter system to try and create flow and momentum with families. Families are now considered for all housing across the city that's suitable to their family size in our social housing stock. And families must also accept their first offer of housing and exit the family shelter when that is made. So certainly we do have concerns in finding hotels and motels that will partner with us at the rates that we're able to afford. I think we will or have formed a small working group to reach out to other hotels and motels to try and ensure. We are geographically dispersed across the city right now in our hotel and motel usage. However, because these particular hotels, motels in Ward 12, we tend to use those more because they have more stock that's suitable and available to us at the time.
So I'm not sure how passing part 2 of this motion strengthens the city. I don't see how this makes things better. I don't see how this makes things better for families who need this type of service. So either staff needs to come out and say, we support this and we recommend the committee pass this, or we don't think there's net benefit and therefore we have concerns with this.
So, as pointed out in the motion, that there is a concentration in Councillor Fleury's ward, and the motion itself says we will bring back recommended actions. So when we do that, we will fully explore what any impact might be on any families, as well as any associated cost. And if there are issues then moving forward, then we would look to committee and council for direction on those.
You don't get a point of clarification, but I will let you speak next.
No,
Is that it, Councillor Brockington?
Well, I understand as the motion is worded, it's asking staff to report back, which, as the motion says, include recommended actions to reduce. You know, I'm not ready to endorse that direction because I have concerns with that, so I'm not going to say go ahead and do that work when I have concerns to begin with. I will listen to the ward councillor, and hopefully if I have concerns he can address them a bit further, but I just want to say, Madam Chair, I have concerns with part 2 of this motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Brockington. Councillor Fleury.
Just back to
Councillor Nussbaum.
Well, I just wanted to address Councillor Brockington's concern, because I had a slightly similar concern as well. If you look at the first sentence of paragraph 2, we can all agree that that should be a goal, absolutely. We want to reduce the use of motels and hotels for temporary overflow accommodation, because ultimately you'd like to try and find permanent housing for those folks. But I think what I hear Councillor Brockington say is, if we instruct staff to come back with options of dispersion that end up, say, costing a lot more money, and then as a result, we're not able to house the number of people we would otherwise, I don't think anyone, including Councillor Fleury, would want that. So one idea, just to insert a little bit more flexibility to staff when they're reviewing the recommendations, is could we insert after ensure that in the second part of this paragraph, ensure that, comma, when possible, comma. So equity should be the goal, absolutely, but that's got to be balanced by affordability, availability, accessibility, etc. But I think the sense of the spirit of this is clear, that Councillor Fleury is looking to make sure that his ward doesn't become the single destination, or you know, if there are options to spread out the load a little bit better. So the words "when possible" might address Councillor Brockington's concern, and so I introduced that as a friendly amendment.
Is that friendly to you, Councillor?
Yes, but before the conversation goes further, I just want to be clear as to the objective of the motion is that basically staff are to review their approach and come back to committee with their recommendations. I've identified a problem, and then they'll come back as to, you know, what are the pieces that could come in play that would resolve this issue. So I don't believe that this binds staff or committee at this point, but it does give direction to the city to go back and do a review of the issue that I've discovered.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Egli.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just need a little bit further clarification in terms of when you're going to come back to us with recommended actions to reduce the use of hotels. I'm interested in what criteria you're going to be looking at. We heard you talk about price point, you know, a working group to find. The other piece that concerns me a little bit with dispersion is that we have motels and hotels right across the city, but they're not necessarily properly positioned, if you will, in terms of access to support networks. Because we just don't want to house people, we want to help people. So I don't know that it needs to be in the motion. If you can tell me that part of what you're going to be looking at is not just can we find more hotels and motels, but can we, for lack of a better term, can we find the right hotels and motels? In other words, that they will still allow access to job retraining programs or social service, whatever the need is, so that we're simply not housing people, but as I say, we're actually helping people with these new locations as well.
So, Madam Chair, to your point about price point, absolutely we look at things like access, we look at things like choice in terms of proximity to either daycare or employment, we look at accessibility as well as access to kitchens. So those are all things that we take into consideration. And going back to my earlier comment in terms of bringing back recommendations, they will not only include impact from a financial perspective, but potential impact on families as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Egli. Councillor Fleury, did you want to wrap up?
I did. So on wrap up, just a couple of elements for committee to consider. One, which is we want to make sure that no one's left on the street, and that's not the message that we're trying to send out of that motion. If there are folks that need emergency response, that the right bedrooms and the amount of bedrooms and services are in place. So I want to be clear as to the intent of the motion. I want to go back to the committee and the discussion on the 10-year housing and homelessness plan, which we went into an important discussion that got us to the per night costs per family, per motel or hotel. And I believe the number was $130 per night. Maybe.
Madam Chair, the average is $110 per night.
So $110 per night, and we have how many families?
We currently have about 182 families that are in off-site services.
And they're there for, on average, I think we said 5 months last time. We went into 180 days was the...
Well, we've had an increase in families that are staying there for longer than 180 days. So the average, I would say, is anywhere between kind of 6 and 9 months at this point.
So further to the point, right now we're in the XY discussion, but I think there's a Z element. There's a third element, which is right now we're looking at it from, oh, there's a need, and we're putting people in motels and hotels, but all that is funds that we're reaching into, millions of dollars that are going to temporary measures for families. So that's also part of the conversation in the review, that in my mind, how do we reduce the amount of hotels and motels while offering an opportunity for stabilization. So I just want to be clear as to the goals, and obviously if we're able to decentralize the approach, because affordability can't be the only one, or else we continue to degrade the quality of the rooms that those hotels are offering. I'd be glad to walk you through some of the hotels, and I'd love to challenge you on if that's the right value for money. So in my mind, this gives us an opportunity for staff to do a fulsome review and come back with options.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fleury. Carried on the recommendations? Okay, so Councillor Brockington wants to dissent on recommendation 2. Is everybody else fine? So we'll record it that way, Councillor. And that's carried. Yes, it's accepted as friendly. So Councillor Brockington, on item number 1, long-term care homes, third-party independent review, there's a procedural motion. Could you read it, please?
Yes, I can, Madam Chair. So again, for item 1, whereas the supporting documentation titled Long-Term Care Services Third-Party Review was not circulated with the agenda package, therefore be it resolved that the Community and Protective Services Committee approve the addition of this document for consideration by the committee at today's meeting pursuant to section 89.3 of the procedure bylaw, being bylaw number 2016-377.
We'll turn then to item number 1, long-term care homes, third-party independent review and related matters. And Ms. Burrell, I'll turn the presentation over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of CPS. I'm joined today by Lise Girard. She is the administrator of Carlton Lodge, as well as Mr. Dean Lett, who's the acting director of the 4 long-term care homes, as well as Mr. Greg Fougere, who we recruited to complete the independent third-party review of our homes. So Greg has come to us highly recommended. He has a master's in health administration and is certified in health as an executive. He has over 35 years of experience, and from being an orderly in the hospitals to a CEO of the Pearly for over 17 years. The Pearly is a 450-bed home. It also offers other services such as assisted living, dementia respite, and senior days program. He has received several awards for his work and is recognized for his expertise and passion in the areas of seniors care and services. So we have been working very closely with Mr. Fougere for the last 6 months. We've met with him pretty much every 2 weeks, where he's provided us with briefings and updates. So this morning, what you have in front of you is Greg's slide deck, where he will be presenting his findings and his recommendations. You also have a staff transmittal report that is an executive summary from Mr. Fougere, as well as that consolidated work plan that staff will speak to after Greg's presentation. So at this point, I would turn the presentation over to Greg to review his findings and recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Madam Chair, councillors, thank you for the opportunity to present the results of the independent review, which began November 1st. So it's now 6 months that I've been involved with the city. As Janice pointed out, I, throughout the review, met with senior staff and kept them abreast of the findings, the issues that I was seeing, recommendations, as well as all of the positive care and services that I was seeing in the home. So before the report is provided to you, I ensured that staff, because the majority of the report are management-related recommendations, I'm going to, the mandate that I was given was to review the 3 years from 2015 to 2017 and to identify influencing factors that may have contributed to the incidents of abuse and neglect that were reported in the media last year. I'd like to acknowledge the 2 residents that were abused and their families. It caused tremendous stress for everyone involved. And those the families, certainly one of the families spent quite a bit of time with me providing their views. The City of Ottawa operates 4 long-term care homes. The number of residents range from 160 to 216. There are 1,000 staff working in the 4 city homes, and $66 million is the annual ongoing operating costs. and $350,000 is the annual currently approved capital budget. As you are all aware, the homes received an order and a director's referral by the province under the long-term care legislation. I witnessed how hard and diligent staff were at dealing with the issues that were brought forward. Compliance is quite separate from what my review entails. However, I will acknowledge that because of that work, the City of Ottawa long-term care homes were returned to compliance in January of this year. And everyone's nightmare, that thing doesn't work. I will await someone to correct the issue. Thank you. So, with that, I'd like to review the mandate and methodology. So the mandate was 3 years, 2015 to 2017. Phase 1, starting November 1st, I was in the 4 long-term care homes, over 6 days in each home to mid-December. I shadowed personal support workers while they were providing care, and I assisted at mealtimes in order to observe the interactions between staff and residents and that critical time in residents' days. Phase 2 involved taking the themes from Phase 1 and then looking in depth in city documents to validate or not the themes that were coming out of the review. The 240 interviews that I completed, 140 of them were over 15 minutes, and some of them were 2.5 hours. So it was quite an extensive review. There was a complete research and literature review. I was fortunate to benefit from Andrea Lou's research, and the report that I've presented provides detailed annotated bibliography on abuse and neglect in long-term care homes, as well as a comprehensive literature review. There are numerous strategies to deal with potential influencing factors of abuse and neglect, and all of those strategies are within the report and the research. My review focuses, though, on pretty well 8 themes. I've now brought it down to 8 themes that need attention. Stage 3 was synthesizing everything from those 2 phases, as well as external interviews, and developing the recommendations report out. The mandate was very specific, that it was related to staff-to-resident abuse and resident-to-resident abuse during that period of time to identify the influencing factors, which I would call risk factors, okay? And based on those risk factors, identify actionable recommendations. And thus, there's quite a detailed list of options, recommendations for staff to consider to deal with these influencing factors. So from that review in the homes, what did I find? Well, it's very important to remember that positive stories outpace the negative. The majority of staff are caring and strive to do their best. I saw that every time I went into the 4 homes. And one personal support worker early on said to me, "You have the time, you have the will, you just don't have the time." And that was a consistent theme throughout the review. I interviewed staff, volunteers, residents, and families, and consistently the issue of staffing and time was #1 priority. And one could say, well, that's always #1 priority, more staff. No matter what situation, you could use more staff to accomplish. In this situation, as you will see in the presentation, it is an important first action that I recommend that the city increase staffing levels, especially of personal support workers. And I'll explain why, and I'll explain the cost of that shortly. Satisfaction in the homes is good to excellent. The majority of capable residents, although they are the smaller group of residents, because most residents, or the majority of residents, have dementia, but the capable residents felt safe and were in control of their care. However, the concerns that I heard were from families of residents who are affected by dementia. And the concern that families have, although staff-to-resident abuse is one issue that was raised throughout the review, there's a tremendous amount of worry because of the coverage of the 2 abuse situations last year. The families are more concerned about resident-to-resident abuse. I think that's really important to remember when you hear what's coming. I'm going to look back to this because it's really important. I really fear that the rest of the presentation will take the attention off the good care that's being provided in the 4 homes. And staff are hurting right now. There's a lot of staff that are excellent staff, that are not abusive, that are not supportive of staff that abuse, that are quite appalled by it, but they're getting painted or tainted with the same brush. And I think it's really important that City Council support the staff through this difficult time. I found no evidence of additional physical and verbal assaults of the nature of the 2 abuses last year that reported in the media. However, I did find evidence of some emotional abuse, staff to resident emotional abuse, as well, and the higher prevalence are issues of neglect. What's the cause of this? Well, there's 2 causes. One is systemic, and some of those systemic issues are issues that you can deal with as a council, and some are individual staff risk factors, which management will deal with. The definitions of abuse and neglect are before you. They're specific and come from the Long-Term Care Homes Act. They are the definitions in the city policy regarding abuse and neglect. So emotional abuse is any threatening, insulting, intimidating, or humiliating gesture, action, and you see the rest of the list. Neglect is an action or an inaction related to treatment, care, services, and assistance. We did a very, very detailed review of all of the annual resident quality inspections from compliance review, all of the complaint investigations, and all of the critical incidents from 2015 to 2017. And from that, we were being able to identify patterns of neglect that need to be identified. Some of the areas that were highest risk in that review were continence care, mealtime, snack time, personal hygiene, transfers, bath time, restraint use, and positioning of residents in bed or in their assistive devices. I read this list because it's really important for all of you to understand that these issues are issues that need attention, and I would say need attention quite soon, very quickly. The key influencing factors are nursing and personal care and staffing. The resident mix, I'll discuss all of these shortly. Communication, it was a dominant theme throughout the review. Human resources leadership, quality and risk oversight, both from a management and a council perspective. The volunteer base, design issues, and essential equipment. So these are the key influencing factors, the key risk factors that I've identified, and from which I've identified a number of recommendations to help manage this risk. The first area is nursing and personal care hours. What's before you is perhaps complex to review today, but As you review it, you will see that the City of Ottawa needs to increase the number of personal support workers. This is the main area in which the city falls behind the provincial average for nonprofit homes in Ontario. There's also a need to increase the registered staff, and I'll speak to that. What does this mean? What it means is, on average, at City of Ottawa long-term care homes, there is 18 minutes less care for every resident every day than the 2016 nonprofit average. Those areas that I just listed of neglect, many of them will be dealt with through an increase in personal support worker staffing. However, I want to make it very clear, increased staffing is not the panacea to deal with the issue of abuse, neglect, and long-term care. It's one factor, it's an important factor, and if council does not deal with this, it's going to be very hard to deal with the other influencing factors that I'm raising today. What would be required for that 18 minutes of day increase are two things. One is an additional 35 full-time equivalent personal support workers. En addition, il faut faire appel à 5,5 infirmières autorisées de plus pour égaler les moyennes de l'Ontario en 2016. I'm recommending that the nursing management structure be reviewed. Currently, there's one structure which is not the traditional structure, and there are some issues that perhaps can be dealt with by looking at different structures. Currently in the homes, one of the ways that City of Ottawa, and indeed other long-term care homes, have dealt with staffing issues to introduce short shifts. For example, 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. in the evening. It gives more assistance with mealtime, gives more assistance with evening care. However, they are the hardest shifts to fill. Once they are filled and a full-time shift comes up, staff will move to the full-time shift, obviously. So it's not working. And it's not only with the City of Ottawa, a number of homes have found that this does not work well. A constant theme at all four homes was that there were issues regarding staff suitability. So I repeat, most staff are caring, most staff are providing good care. However, there is a percentage, and what the phrase that I heard often is there are staff that are working here just for the money. Long-term care is not a place for staff to work just for the money. Good long-term care involves relationship building and compassion. And if you're there just for the money, then you're not going to have the compassion that's needed in this type of care. Currently, the city funds provides additional funding in about $14.5 million because of higher wages at the city than the average long-term care home. This is historical collective agreement, as well as issues like pay equity in the city drive wages up. There are other issues of funding that need a discussion with the province of Ontario also. However, what we're dealing with here is which level of government funds the need for the staffing that I'm recommending. I recommend that personal support workers be involved in peer-to-peer training, peer-to-peer education on areas that they're normally responsible for. For example, one risk area is transfers, transferring residents from their bed to a chair, transferring residents from their chair to the bath, transferring residents in other ways. Personal support workers are able to provide that training, and it provides certainly an opportunity and a recognition of their skills. One theme, and it comes up again with families that I also heard consistently, is that staff need more education on dementia. And that's not to say that there is not already education. In fact, there's a tremendous amount of education on dementia for personal support workers and other nursing staff. However, it's still a theme that more is required. Pour les infirmières, des infirmières proposées, je suggère que nous ayons un partenaire afin excusez-moi, pour toutes les francophones ici, mon français n'est pas si bon aujourd'hui que d'habitude. Mais il faut qu'on ait un partenaire afin d'établir un cours de certification pour les préposés de soins. One thing that is occurring that is really hurting care is temporary movement of staff for temporary positions. When I was reviewing, for example, there was a temporary position came up, and there were 8 applicants from the other homes for the temporary position. You know, consistency in staffing is a #1 issue in long-term care for good care also. So I'm recommending that that movement stop. Now, some of these require, obviously, negotiation with the union, in this case with CUPE, and I'm recommending that the union also be part of the solutions here. When I met with CUPE, CIPP, with staff, everyone had the same common goal, and that was to provide the best care that's possible. So it means that everyone has to come to the table to resolve this issue. One issue at the city long-term care homes, and again, this is an issue at other long-term care homes, is the resident mix. There's a misconception that every long-term care bed is the same. And this is a misconception that needs to end. There are complex special needs that residents have, and there are specialized dementia care needs that residents have. So in your accountability agreement with the LHIN, you are to provide 717 regular long-term care beds. There's no such thing as a regular long-term care bed. It's the way it's classified, but this has become much more complex long-term care. Residents have very special needs in long-term care. Long-term care homes, the 4 city homes, are not retirement homes. There's a huge amount of a number of retirement homes which provide another option. And even within retirement homes, there is some care being provided for those people that can afford to add on the care. However, once people get to a certain level and the complexity that I'm showing, long-term care home is probably the place that they will move. So I'm not going to read this entire list, but I'll give you an example of a few things. You have to look at the complexity of the resident to be admitted. You have to look at dementia and what are the behaviors associated with dementia that need to be managed or cared for. What's a vac dressing? It's a vacuum-assisted closure to a wound. So these are wounds that are beyond a scratch. These required vacuum-assisted closure. What's a PICC line? A PICC line is a peripherally inserted central catheter. And residents have PICC lines. Residents have intravenous therapy. So there are a number of special needs here in long-term care homes that I believe not only for the city, but for the province, that we are not yet addressing the complexity of resident care in the way we need to. I believe that the city homes could create program descriptions. There are 2 main programs that the city offer for long-term care. One I call physical functional decline, and the other I call secure dementia care. They are very different. I think attention and priority needs to be given to the program descriptions for dementia care. There's a need to balance the complex need through the admission process. So when a bed comes up in the long-term care homes, it's not just the next person on the waiting list of the local health integration network. They already prioritize based on need. However, the homes may not be able to admit someone with some of the special needs when a bed comes up. It may be wait until the appropriate bed comes up and then we'll admit you. We are really overloading long-term care homes, including city homes. And I don't mean that in a negative way for the residents, because the residents have true needs, but we are then putting them in a situation often where it tips the balance, and then everyone, all residents, will be affected in some way. I believe that admissions coordinator position should be put in place. I believe 2 of the homes, one admissions coordinator and the other 2, another admissions coordinator, could assist in this situation. The last point is the social worker role needs to change, I believe, because there's a tremendous amount of time being spent on the admission process versus social work, and I believe that families affected by dementia need more attention. It's the families I'm talking about. Often in the care and long-term care, families require care and attention also for their loved ones who have dementia. Because of the situation with staffing levels, the complexity of secure dementia care, and as you'll see later, design, I'm recommending that the City of Ottawa reduce the number of dementia secure resident home areas from 6 to 4. Again, I want to step back now and tell you, personal support workers have 6 to 8 months of education beyond high school. Registered staff, registered practical nurses, and registered nurses have much more education. Obviously, they are part of, under the Regulated Health Professions Act, and report to a College of Nurses. So it's very important to understand the difference in the skills of personal support workers. Many personal support workers come into long-term care without having much experience in seniors care, and a lot of them have no experience in dementia care. So they need continual ongoing support. Again, the theme of dementia care came out, and families need dementia care education as much as staff. One of the approaches in dementia care is called gentle persuasion approach. And this is what personal support workers receive for assisting with residents who have behaviors that are resulting from their dementia, whether that be physical, whether that be verbal. And families need to understand what the gentle persuasion approach is. For example, I'll give you an example. If you go into a room in the morning with a resident, that resident has dementia, and today is not a good day, and you try and shave, let's say it's me, and you try and shave me, and it's not a good day, I may just lash out at you, I just hit you. Okay? There needs to be an understanding that sometimes the personal support worker will have to back away, and when the family comes in and their loved one's not shaved, there's a reason, and that the family understands the reason, because that wasn't the right time for it to occur, or aggression probably would have increased and there would have been a bad outcome. That's one example. There are many others. I believe that it would be important to negotiate a voluntary exchange between the physical functional decline, resident home areas, and secure dementia programs, because not everybody wants to work with residents with dementia. This is not a bad thing. This is very good that people recognize that they don't necessarily want to work with people with dementia. However, the reality is people have mortgages, people have responsibilities, and if they're working part-time in an area they're comfortable with and a full-time position comes up in dementia care, probably they're going to move to that full-time position. Well, there may be a need to offer staff the opportunity to move, not just move, say it's a day shift full-time to another day shift full-time and another level of care. No loss, no change to the staff member other than getting them to the right level of care. Communication was a huge issue and theme. Obviously, staff are rushed. affected by the workload. There are insensitive directives to residents. This is the emotional abuse. There are disrespectful comments. Sometimes staff speak a different language while they're providing care. Families and residents often reported they did not understand staff. And it's been discussed before, there's a need for sensitivity to linguistic and cultural needs of some residents, and even down to body language, and a simple smile. These were areas of communication that needed to be worked on. So, obviously, I'm recommending education for effective communication. There's a shift change report. These are 24-hour, 7-day-a-week operations, right? And each shift has a shift change report where they communicate changes in the resident status to the next shift. There's a need for improvement in these reports. Some of the shift change reports that I saw really would not communicate the information of personal support workers that they need for various reasons. One is often they're in rooms that are very small and staff are outside the rooms and it's hard to hear. Other reasons are the nature and the way the report is given. The internal and external communications need to be improved, and this is one area that I think Council will benefit from, is a refreshed website with risk and quality information on it. You'll see later, I'm recommending that Council have another forum in which to receive and discuss risk and quality information. But websites, if you look at long-term care homes that are in the lead, they are providing and are accountable to the community by sharing that information and sharing what they're doing about these situations. Also, there are no newsletters in the homes, so this is something else. It's simple, but all of this builds trust. All of this builds openness. Human resources and labor relations are not well integrated to support the 4 homes. Very much what I heard through the review was mainly a labor relations perspective. There's no one in the homes to provide the human resource leadership. So I'm recommending that a dedicated human resource manager be established for the 4 homes. There's 1,000 staff working in the 4 homes. The current structure with the ministry does not support the administrators and managers. I truly believe that if you implement a human resource manager, if staff implement a human resource manager and receive the funds for that, that in fact your labor relations issues will decline. That should be an outcome. There has been, in some cases, there has been management education and long-term care experience needed to be increased, and they need to be increased now. And search broadened. Right now, and up to this point in time, the search has been limited to two vehicles, and I'm recommending a broadened search for the director and administrator positions as they become available. There's also some staff-to-staff relationship issues that need attention, and in one home, they need more attention at this time, and I'm recommending a staff development position. The administrators and the managers simply do not have enough time to deal with all the staff development issues and staff relations. This affects care. It's a huge impact on care. So for quality and risk oversight, on the management perspective, there was a high level of instability between 2015 and 2017. There were 52 changes in that 3-year period in 21 manager positions. You can't lead an organization and deal with the kind of change that's required with this type of instability. 43 were transfers between homes or within homes and within positions. Provides no continuity in management. There were people that were assigned to temporarily to administrator positions through the years that have the management education and long-term care qualifications. All of this has an impact. So I'm recommending that temporary transfers be stopped except for emergency, short-term situations. There's a need for a new nursing practice manager on the senior management team and a dedicated quality risk manager. For council recommendations, there's one recommendation for you. Your mandate as a Community Protective Services Committee, as you well know, is very, very broad. You do not have the time here to discuss the details related to quality and risk for long-term care homes. So I'm recommending that you create a long-term care board of directors. Your terms of reference allow for it. And that long-term care board of directors should also include I'm recommending 6 additional community positions, and that a skills matrix be developed for these positions. In order to provide the right level of oversight at a council level, you need to have the right skill mix on this committee, obviously led by a councillor from the committee. Or 2, it depends on what model you wish to implement. There's good information that you can start with, and this can start now. And there's a requirement in Ontario under Health Quality Ontario to develop a quality improvement narrative. So what this means is you can receive information right now on this narrative and see what the issues are that need to be dealt with in terms of improvement. Every year you consider an annual budget. Between 2015 to 2017, there was no increase in budget despite a 1% increase in the level of care in Ontario each year in long-term care. Okay. You need to add a risk assessment to your annual budget process. You do have the format for it, but I didn't see the risk assessment at a level that I feel that is appropriate. There's been a decline in volunteers in the 3 years I reviewed. In one home particularly, there was a fair decline. This has occurred also because of some of the movement of managers, I believe, but there needs to be an increase in volunteers. There's 570 volunteers at the 4 homes, so this is great, and this is a high number of volunteers, but more are needed, and I hope the community steps up and contacts the 4 homes and offers assistance. One particular practical consideration is more assistance at mealtime and shift change monitoring, because there's not too many staff around when you have groups of people with dementia that may have behaviors and strike out or be verbally assaultive. If more volunteers are around to alert staff that there's a situation where they need to intervene, that would be very helpful. So all of these types of recommendations will require further discussions. Some of them may require discussion with the unions. As I said earlier, I'm hoping the unions will come to the table as partners in dealing with some of these issues. There is a sense that the union is representing staff who are not suited for long-term care and who may have performance issues. They're pursuing it, and it is to the point that it is affecting other staff and care. And I had to bring up on a number of times, I said to staff, please speak to your union. You're telling me this, you're concerned about the performance of other people. I heard staff say, you know, I've told the union and this doesn't have an impact, or nothing will be done. It's another issue with management or union that I've told them and nothing will be done. This has to be done.
Mr. Frugiero,
yes?
Could you please speak directly into the mic? I'm told that some people are having trouble hearing you.
Certainly.
Yeah, that doesn't happen very often, but sorry.
I heard myself. Anyway, sorry about that. Also, there's a need to look at innovative programs like music therapy and dance therapy for people affected by dementia. It's amazing how you can deal with issues of the behaviors that may come as a result of a dementia through one-on-one music therapy, through dance therapy. This isn't recreation bringing in a musical group. That's all important and entertaining as part of a resident's life, important part. Therapy, these are staff positions. The buildings are 13 to 30 years old, and the 30-year-old building is actually 50 years old, but had a major renovation 30 years ago. The designs are reflective of the resident care needs at the time, in the decade they were built. The oldest designs significantly increase risk for residents with dementia and should be the highest priority for change. There's one particular home, since the 30-year renovation, that I think will be extremely hard to retrofit to deal with the risk issues. Just imagine there's a huge area in front of 2 elevators in a secure an area with demented residents. There are wings that go off where staff are in rooms providing care. There's a real potential for resident-to-resident abuse if the design is not appropriate. In this design, also, the dining room is off to one side. It's going to be very hard to deal with that issue. So I'm recommending in that case that, in fact, the unit change from a secure dementia unit to a physical functional decline unit, and that, in fact, one of the resident home areas at Gary J. Armstrong be changed to serve Francophone residents. $350,000 for capital equipment for the 4 homes is simply not enough. I didn't go in any great detail to analyze this, but I know intuitively, I know from my experience that it's not enough. For the beds, mechanical lifts are 2 key pieces of equipment that there's a need to continually replace. I'm recommending that you close the gap, that you ask staff to bring back for next year's budgeting process the gap analysis between the $350,000 for budget and the 10-year capital plan. Information technology is something that is changing as we speak. I understand that there'll be a new resident assessment instrument software implemented in the fall. This is the critical tool for communicating the needs of residents in long-term care. It also is the critical tool that will provide council the quality and risk data you need to provide your oversight. What does this all mean at the end of the day? You need 35 more full-time equivalent personal support workers to get to the average of other nonprofit long-term care homes in Ontario. So you need to come up so there's a level playing field with where other homes are. Those 35 personal support workers will cost $2.3 million annually. I suggest 5.5 to 6 positions, new positions: nursing practice manager, quality and risk manager, human resources manager, admission coordinators, and staff development resource persons. So in addition to the nursing recommendations, I believe this is important. Registered staff increases need a bit more study. As was in a previous slide, there's a need to increase your registered staff by just over 5 full-time equivalent staff to reach the 2016 average. I want to now come back because I've been providing a lot of information to you that identifies the influencing factors and the risks. These are serious. However, I do not want to end this presentation suggesting that good care isn't being provided, because that's not true. The care is good to excellent. What I observed in many cases, I'll tell you a few stories. A personal support worker was working with a resident who had dementia, and the resident was physically fighting back. Unusual. Until the personal support worker figured out that it was the red shirt he was wearing. He left, changed his shirt, came back, and everything was fine. Care was fine. So that shows at the personal support worker level the kind of sensitivity some staff have. I was in the homes at 6 o'clock in the morning on at least once over the week, and I saw residents coming, again, residents with dementia, coming out to the nursing area, and they were smiling. They approached the staff. There was no sense. They didn't give me any sense that there were any issues with care. Families went to pains. I walked out of one of the homes, was walking out of one of the homes, where the wife of a resident, who I also had spoke to earlier, he was going out for care at a hospital because of a certain issue, And she said, oh, I'm glad I saw you. Like as she's going out the door with an ambulance and so on, the care is great here. You know, so story after story after story, I heard good care. However, in order to deal with the issues that are before you that resulted potentially in abuse, you need to deal with the influencing factors that I'm raising today. So thank you very much, and je m'excuse que j'ai pas parlé. J'espère qu'avec les questions, je peux répondre mieux que j'ai présenté.
Merci, Monsieur Fougère. Thank you very much for your very thorough and well-considered report and your recommendations. I think what you've done is really paint a picture for the committee of the complexity of the challenges that are faced in long-term care, but you've also given us, I think, a roadmap to improve long-term care in our city, so for that we're very thankful. What we're going to do is we're going to take questions to Mr. Fougère first. When we're finished with all the questions to Mr. Fougère, we're going to hear the staff response, and then we'll be able to ask staff questions. But before we do that, I want to just put a motion on the table that the mayor and I have been working on over the weekend, so that you will have that as a backdrop when you ask your questions. So I apologize for my voice today. It's just, I guess, too much partying at that OAG on the weekend or something. I'm not sure why. But anyway, it's caught up with. Whereas both the independent review and staff benchmarking has found that city residents receive an average of 18 minutes less nursing and personal care for each resident per day than the 2016 Ontario nonprofit average, and whereas the independent review has recommended that 35 additional personal support workers are required to provide optimal care and reduce the risk for abuse and neglect, with an estimated operating budget impact of $2.3 million, and whereas staff has reported that there was a consistent message across the board that more personal support workers and more training and direct involvement of personal support workers in care is a high priority, and whereas the 2019 budget is not expected to be adopted until March 2019, and this is too long for residents in our homes to wait for more care, and whereas staff has advised that they can accelerate the hiring of the 35 personal support workers this year with a 2018 part-year impact of an estimated $800,000, and whereas the city treasurer has advised that there are sufficient funds in the one-time and unforeseen account to permit the accelerated hiring of these workers in 2018. Therefore, be it resolved that the Community and Protective Services Committee recommend that City Council approve that 35 new additional FTEs in long-term care services for personal support workers, and that $800,000 be provided from the one-time and unforeseen account to permit the hiring to take place in 2018. So before we move to questions, I just want to take a quick moment to just to introduce this motion that I have just read. Long-term care homes provide service to some of our most vulnerable citizens, and we know that each one deserves to live in a safe and comfortable home. I know that our staff are taking the recommendations provided to them by Mr. Fougère very seriously. It has become abundantly clear from both the Auditor General's report this morning and from Mr. Fougère that our homes are understaffed and immediate action is necessary. With that in mind, the mayor and I have been collaborating to provide our long-term care staff with the resources they need to address these recommendations. The motion today asks this committee to recommend council approve the hiring of 35 new FTEs for personal support workers at the cost of $800,000. The full year impact of $2.3 million staffing costs will be addressed in the 2019 budget. And I know Mr. Lett will elaborate on this later, but the question around registered nursing positions, I know there was money in the 2018 provincial budget, and we're anticipating new registered nurses positions coming to us as a result of the provincial budget. Furthermore, at the FedCo committee tomorrow, the committee will be asked to approve an additional $1 million in long-term care investment for training, equipment, and IT upgrades, with flexibility delegated to the general manager to use some of the $1 million as needed to augment the $800,000 for hiring. So if it takes more, done sooner and it takes more than the $800,000, the general manager will have the flexibility to use some of the $1 million in one-time capital funding in order to make sure that we hire as many staff as quickly as possible. So the overall investment in 2018 of $1.8 million, I think, based on what we've heard today, is a vital step in ensuring that our residents are provided the care they deserve. So with that said, we're going to now go to questions to Mr. Fougere, and we'll start with Councillor.
Actually, my questions are for staff, so.
Okay, so then Councillor Fleury.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Vous êtes confortable en français, sinon je peux... C'est Fouchard? OK. Donc, moi, ça fait 8 ans que je suis élu, puis à chaque 2-3 fois par année, je vais visiter de façon plus officielle les centres de longue durée. Puis, ce que je remarque, puis c'est peut-être pas évident, vous avez fait une revue d'une période, c'est un petit peu un flash, mais pour moi, l'environnement a demeuré le même, mais je peux juste parler des centres qui sont dans ma communauté. Gary J. Armstrong, Centre d'accueil Champlain, sont les deux dans ma communauté. Physiquement, l'espace est bon. L'énergie semble bonne. On voit beaucoup d'entraide des familles qui sont présentes. J'ai pas le pouls du jour au jour, mais ce que j'observe, c'est vraiment que les besoins des résidents qui se retrouvent dans nos centres sont de plus en plus criants. Avant, tout le monde était capable de se déplacer. Tout le monde était capable de se nourrir. Quand je dis tout le monde, je généralise, là, mais il y avait une grande majorité des gens qui étaient actifs. Vous parliez tout tantôt de l'infolette d'un newsletter. C'était bon quand tout le monde était actif, puis il y avait une présence. Mais quand là, on va, il y a beaucoup de gens qui ne sortent même pas de leur chambre parce que physiquement, psychologiquement, pour des raisons de santé chronique, ils ne sont plus capables. Alors, moi, j'ai une question peut-être encore plus macro que ce que vous présentez. C'est quoi le rôle des soins de longue durée? Est-ce que c'est devenu des hôpitaux? Parce que il y a beaucoup les besoins sur nos employés, c'est très similaire aux soins hospitaliers complexes. Là. Alors, j'aimerais ça comprendre d'après vous. Moi, en 8 ans, j'ai vu une transformation drastique. Là. Alors, où on s'en va? Est-ce qu'on continue à s'en aller vers une approche qui est très hospitalière? Ou est-ce que... Parce que là, moi, ce que je remarque, c'est que dans notre communauté, on a des besoins encore plus vastes. Je suis communautaire à Ottawa. On a des personnes aînées qui se retrouvent dans des bâtiments, qui sont isolés, qui remplissent tous les critères pour être dans nos soins de longue durée. Mais là, il n'y a plus de place. Là. Alors, moi, j'aimerais ça que vous reculiez un petit peu puis vous nous donniez une impression plus vaste du système, parce que je pense qu'il y a un plus gros problème qui n'est peut-être pas discuté en ce moment.
Merci. Je pense que vous avez expliqué ça très bien. Le niveau de soins a changé beaucoup. Maintenant, on appelle les foyers les homes, les maisons. Mais ce n'est pas une maison. Maintenant, il y a beaucoup plus de soins médicaux et autres soins. Le rôle je pense que le Local Health Integration Network est responsable pour la liste d'attente. Et il y a beaucoup de pression accepter les résidents avec les soins à un niveau très, très, très haut. Et le problème pour les foyers est que le lit n'est pas la même chose. Chaque lit a sa chance. Il faut que on est flexible avec ça, mais on a besoin d'avoir une balance de soins sur une unité. Okay? Et ça, c'est l'objectif. Mais de temps en temps, c'est difficile quand le système, quand le besoin est très haut et il y a besoin. Mais la ville d'Ottawa, avec ses ressources, n'est pas capable, et aussi autres foyers, n'est pas capable de prendre tout le monde avec tous ses besoins. Et c'est constamment une question de balance, flexibilité. Mais maintenant, j'ai vu et j'ai regardé et j'ai entendu que le soin est de temps en temps trop lourd faire bien. Est-ce que ça répond?
Oui, maybe as a follow-up, you talked about the LEN specifically, and in my mind, there's something to be said around our duty and responsibility as a city. I think officially in regulation, we're mandated to operate one long-term care facility. I believe it's 4, right, that we operate currently?
From 717 residents.
Yeah. So I wonder, understanding the waiting list, understanding this need that's more and more almost, on the border of hospital care, and where there's less and less independence of the residents, where you see that land, because, pushing the people that should be in our long-term cares are in housing in our community struggling, and that adds pressure elsewhere. So, it's not just about the services, it's also about the waiting list, and, these pieces kind of play together. So I wonder if you're not seeing just a need, like hospitals are not keeping the folks long enough, and then there's no other options then to come into to our centers, and how do you see that being resolved? I don't know if I guess that's my core question is, at which point does it not become a city responsibility and it's a provincial healthcare one?
Well, in fact, as you probably are aware, healthcare is a provincial responsibility, not necessarily a city responsibility. However, City of Ottawa homes and the forums in some way have existed for decades. So there's been an identification by the city that you want to be in the caring business for seniors in your community. Here's the situation. There are people in the community that have the same high level of care as people in long-term care, and they are receiving that care through the local health integration network, either home care, the assistance of neighbors, the assistance of families, and so on, and they're staying where they want to be in their own home, okay? And some people struggle to do that, but that's what they prefer to do. They are making that choice. Sometimes you have couples where one couple is healthy, but the other couple, the partner of the couple has significant needs. Well, that spouse wants to keep them at home. So, there have been a lot of positive things that I've seen over the years in terms of home care and what we can do keeping people at homes. And long-term care, one of the things that I'm recommending for the future for this committee is you get into strategic planning for long-term care, because it's like a 4-year cycle, it would appear, and it needs to go beyond that. But there's no reason that long-term care homes can't reach out and provide the care to those people struggling in the community. There's no, and it's happening, by the way, where long-term care homes who have personal support workers, and instead of going to the emergency department when someone falls and can't get up, they call the long-term care home, middle of the night, they send out a personal support worker to help them. That's the direction it should be. It's not, what I'm saying is not that long-term care homes aren't needed. They very well are, and the city's providing a service that is essential. If the city ever decided to reduce because you can't afford it, the province would have a significant issue in the Ottawa area if the city got out of the business. So they should step up to the table, be partners with the city in looking at some funding issues. If you need more support for funding, I mentioned earlier, I'll leave that point be. Bottom line is, these long-term care homes are no longer just homes. They're homes with a lot of care within them being provided. City's doing a good job for the most part. However, there are some areas you need to work on.
Okay, thank you.
Merci, Conseiller Fleury. Councillor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. It was very comprehensive, and some very thoughtful advice was provided. I just want to ask and follow up on some of your observations about nursing and personal care hours. And instinctively, I would be tempted to suggest or to understand that there would be a correlation between staff time and the amount of time that a patient sees staff and patient outcomes. But I don't know if that's evidence-based. I mean, that would be my assumption. But I guess my question is, I know that there are a series of quality indicators that's used, I guess, by the Ontario Long-Term Home Association. And I'm curious how the 4 city-run facilities stacked up on those. So the question is, how do the 4 homes that you were looking up, how do they stack up against the rest of the field when it comes to the quality indicators that are part of the review of all Ontario long-term homes?
It's pretty difficult for me to answer that without the information in front of me. The city long-term care homes quality indicators are the same as other long-term care homes in Ontario, so that information is available. And it is, when you say evidence-based and outcome, staffing is an indicator, is one of the inputs that affects the outcome. Could I say what portion that is? No, I mentioned in the report that staffing is not the panacea. You have to deal with all of the other issues as well. But I know from experience that the staffing does affect the outcome of care. If you have personal support workers received more funding, have 16 minutes more of care a day, you can imagine how the corners they cut may be not as sharp, let's say. You know, right now, in order to provide the best care within the resources, staff